Greetings everyone, welcome back to another episode of Bite Size History on History with Audrey D. In today's lesson we are going to be focusing on the early Vedic period of ancient India. And its history is about the migration of potential Indo-Aryans as well as the development of the Vedas and the development of Hinduism. If you're enjoying this channel so far, please make sure you're hitting that like and subscribe button. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook as History with Audrey D. All right, let's go ahead and get into today's lesson on the early Vedic period and its impacts on ancient India. Before we start our lesson, we need to look at our standard, our learning target, and our learning goal for today. Our standard for today is going to be Standard 4, which is to recognize significant events, figures, and contributions of classical Asian civilizations. Our learning goal for today is discuss the significance of Aryan and other tribal migrations on Indian civilization. Our learning target is to discuss how the migration of the Aryan and other tribes contributed to the development and culture of India. We are also going to have an essential question for today to guide us in understanding the early Vedic civilization. Our essential question is, how can migrating groups impact a civilization? Now with that, we also have some key terms which include the Vedas, Sanskrit, and the caste system. Let's begin with an overview of the Vedic period, which ran from roughly 1750 to 500 BCE. The Vedic period of ancient India lasted from 1750 to 500 BCE. The Vedas are the oldest texts in Hinduism, and the word Vedas means knowledge. The Rig Veda is the oldest and most important of the four canonical sacred texts of Hinduism known as the Vedas. Hinduism is considered one of the oldest religions in the world. The Vedic period is divided into the Early Vedic, which was estimated between 1750 to 1000 BCE, with some variations on dates being 1500 to 800 BCE. And the later Vedic period, which lasted from roughly 1000 or 800 to 500 BCE. Vedic civilization is believed to have been centered in the northwestern parts of the Indian subcontinent and spread to the Ganges Plain around 1200 BCE. Many historians believe the Vedic civilization was a composite of the Indo-Aryan and Harappan or Indus Valley cultures. The Vedas were composed or written in archaic or Vedic Sanskrit. The beginning of the Vedic period of ancient India has a number of contested subjects, such as the migration of Indo-Aryans. As mentioned in our previous lesson on ancient cities of the Indus Valley, the beginning of the Vedic period links with the disputed Aryan invasion theory. The Aryan invasion theory suggested that North India was originally inhabited by darker-skinned Dravidians, who may have founded the Indus Valley or Harappan civilization. It was theorized that sometime around 1500 BCE, lighter-skinned invaders known as Aryans pushed the Dravidians south. There is no evidence, however, to support this theory of invasion. And other researchers have argued the lack of stories or traditions that would describe this level of event and therefore reject the possibility that the Vedas developed outside of India. These same scholars believe the Aryans to have settled India much earlier than originally believed, and their language of Sanskrit was derived from earlier Indo-European dialects. Some of the sources of evidence for Aryan migration come from the Hittites, who recorded this occurring around 1400 BCE. The Hittites had arrived in Anatolia around the beginning of the second millennium, or 2000 BCE. Similarly, Mesopotamia saw the arrival of the Kassites around 1760 BCE. The Kassites introduced the horse and chariot and had Indo-European names. Other evidence of Indo-European migration includes an inscription at Bogazkoy in Anatolia of a similar time period containing Indo-European technical terms having to do with training horses, which connects them with the cultural origins of Central Asia or the southern Russian steppes. Also, there are clay tablets dating to roughly 1400 BCE that were written at Tel el Amarna in Upper Egypt in Akkadian cuneiform that mention the names of Indo-European princes. A final piece of evidence for the potential of Indo-European or Indo-Aryan migration to ancient India was debated by European scholars in the 16 and 1700s CE that first studied the Sanskrit language. These scholars noticed similarities in the syntax, or the way words and phrases were arranged to form sentences, as well as vocabulary, between Sanskrit and the Greek and Latin languages. The region near India, called the Iranian Plateau, was subject to a similar migration, which is where we find a potential branch of Iranian Aryans that migrated to northern India. This region contains the Kabul River in the north and the Sarasvati and upper Ganges, Yamuna Doab in the south. The Sarasvati was a sacred river that dried up during the later Vedic period. This river was said to personify a goddess, and in later Hinduism, the inventor of spoken and written Sanskrit, and the consort of Brahma, the creator of the Vedas. This is also the region that the majority of the hymns of the Rig Veda were composed. Other links between the gods of India include the gods of the Mitanni Empire, which are tied to the migration of another people found in the Vedic hymns, in which the clans refer to the Dasyas, who were said to have an alien or unknown language and dark complexions. This group of people worshiped strange gods, and some of this group were rich in cattle and lived in fortified places that were often attacked by the god Indra. Another group, referenced as the wealthy Panis, were known to be hostile and stole cattle. The Rig Veda gods have names similar to those of the Mitanni Empire, which include Indara or Indra, Yaruvna or Varuna, Mitira or Mitra, Nisatyas or Ashvins, to name a few. Moving on to the early Vedic period, in which the Indo-Aryans were reliant more so on a pastoral, semi-nomadic lifestyle. Their agriculture included raising sheep, cattle, and goats, which would eventually become symbols of wealth in this society. The Indo-Aryans memorized and recited the religious and literary works of their culture, which was also recorded in their sacred language of Sanskrit. The early Vedic period also corresponds with the Rig Vedic period. That is because the Rig Veda is believed to have been written during this time frame. The Rig Veda contains many myths and poetic stories regarding the origin of the world. The Aryans during the Vedic period would often have power struggles over land and resources. One of the most well-known power struggles was recorded in the Rig Veda. It is known as the Battle of the 10 Kings. This occurred between the Bharatas tribe and a group of 10 other tribes that banded together. They fought on the banks of what is now the Ravi River. In this battle, the Bharatas tribe, led by King Sudas, was victorious, and through this victory, they combined their tribe with the conquered Puru's tribe. This is how the Kuru, a Vedic tribal union, was formed in northern India. This is one of the few battles described in the Rig Veda. The early Vedic period was a transition from nomadic pastoralism to settled village communities. There was an intermixing of pastoral and agrarian economies, with cattle being the dominant commodity at first. This is where words like gotra, meaning cowpen, came to signify endogamous kinship, and gavishti, searching for cows, came to mean to denote war. Many other key words, such as Vish, meaning clan, and Grama, meaning a community of families, or a wagon train, came from the early Vedic period. These groups or clans had chiefs and priests that had responsibilities within the clan, with the chief being its protector and war leader. The early Vedic period also corresponds with the Rig Vedic period. The Rig Veda is a collection of religious hymns and allusions without explanation of various myths and stories, mainly in the younger books 1 through 10. It might be the oldest literary document in existence. The Rig Vedic Aryans had a great deal in common with the Andronovo culture, Mitanni kingdoms, and early Iranians. The Andronovo culture is believed to be the site of the first horse-drawn chariots. For government and society, during the early Vedic period, the government, or polity, known then as the Rashtra, was governed by a Raja or Rajan chieftain, or king, who was often known as the protector or supreme ruler. The king had assistance from various other officials, including a chaplain or purohita and the senani or army chief, as well as the army or sena. Within these groups are foot soldiers and chariot soldiers armed with bow and arrows. They had spies and messengers, and as far as societal standards go, there was a rigid varna or class system in place, as well as rules for marriage. As we can see in this image, the caste system included Brahmins and Kshatriyas, which were higher than Vaishyas and Shudras. Brahmins were specialized in creating poetry, preserving sacred texts, and carrying out different rituals. They functioned as intellectual leadership and restricted social mobility between the Varnas, as in the fields of science, war, literature, religion, and the environment. Proper pronunciation of verses in ritual was considered essential for prosperity and success in war and harvests. Kshatriyas amassed wealth or cattle, and many commissioned the performance of sacrifices. Kshatriya helped in administering polity, maintained the structure of society and the economy of the tribe, as well as helped to maintain law and order. During the early Vedic period, the three classes of Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas were considered relatively equal. The Vaishyas were pastoralists and farmers. The Shudras were the lower class, which included artisans and were meant to serve the upper three classes. Other social structures of the early Vedic period focused on cattle as a primary bartering item for the economy. Cattle were held in high esteem and often show up in Rigvedic hymns. Goddesses were often compared to cows and gods as bulls. Agriculture also became more prominent over time as the community began to settle down. Families were patriarchal, and people prayed to have many sons. The primary texts of this period are believed to be the 4 Vedas. However, other texts, such as the Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and older Upanishads, along with the oldest Rata Sutras, are also considered early Vedic. Let's take a look at how religion was practiced in the early Vedic period. Styles of worship included the performance of sacrifices during which verses of Rig Veda were chanted. They sang of samans and mumbling of other mantras. Only the 3 upper classes had these rituals done by priests, and the Sudras, or lower class, were excluded. The Vedic religion evolved in the Hindu paths of yoga and Vedanta, a religious path considering itself the essence of the Vedas. The ritualistic traditions of Vedic religion are preserved in the Shrauta tradition, which included animal sacrifice and was abandoned by the higher castes by the end of the Vedic period. The final note on the early Vedic period is the lasting concept of the Vedas, which is the universal soul, permeating everything that exists, meaning that all life is to be respected, including the life of the planet itself. We'll be doing a lesson on the Vedas in the future, and we'll go a bit deeper into their meanings. Alright, well that wraps it up for our lesson on the early Vedic period of ancient India. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and if you did, please make sure you're hitting that like and subscribe button. Also, please find me on Instagram and Facebook as History with Audrey D. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson.